This is a Bergen Film Club podcast.
Like an old movie removed from the frame, I am floating and looking for someone to blame. Won't you project me on the walls of your heart? I'm waiting for the real thing to start.
Hello and welcome back to The Real Thing. I'm your host, Joe Lawrence, and we're back again for some more exciting podcasting. This podcast is an extension of Bergen Film Club or Bergen Film Society, where I talk about the films included in the film club's program. I talk about why they're cool, why you should go see them, and also why the board members chose these films. But today, we're doing stuff a little bit differently. We have a very exciting guest here with us today, the man, myth, legend, Wise John, aka Connor. Hello.
Yes. Hello. Hey, Joe.
Hey. Was that good
hi, mysterious listener crowd.
Yeah, it's really. I'm glad that we finally arranged this.
Me too.
Yeah.
Been a while in the making.
For sure. Yeah. Me being extremely unpredictable and hectic, but I think we're good now.
Yeah.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, I'm just going to call you Connor, if that's cool.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Your stage name. The stage name of Wise John. Connor makes the music for the podcast. Which I have to say, maybe this whole episode is just going to be me inflating your ego. But
do that.
yeah. I always get very high compliments on the music for the podcast.
Yay.
Yeah, everyone is a big fan of the theme song, as am I.
Yes. Oh,
yeah.
That's huge. That was my first contracted production work that was not just me producing my own things.
Yeah. I was very excited that you wanted to even work with us. Because I'm a big fan, as you know. So yeah, it was great. It made my mum cry. I don't know if I ever told you that.
No. Oh
yeah.
Yes. I love making mothers cry. That's
she was moved by the music.
Oh yeah.
But it's very beautiful, and I'm also very thankful for the whole thing. So we're going to talk a little bit about you and about your music, and perhaps how that's could be linked to film or not, or whatever. We'll just see how it goes. But in classic Real Thing fashion, we'll start with some recommendations. Do you have anything that you want to hit out of the gate?
I mean, I'm a bit of a Luddite when it comes to visual media. I don't know. I can talk about it somewhat convincingly, but my catalog of things that I have watched is notoriously small amongst my friends. But lately, I watched 2 shows that I didn't think that I was going to like, and then ended up liking them a lot, which were The Boys and Ted Lasso.
Ooh, okay.
I thought that Ted Lasso was going to be too saccharine for me. I wouldn't think that I would like that, but it had a lot of heart, and it was fun, and I was sad when I was watching it, and it became a way for me to not be sad, and then it got me through a sad point, and then I felt good, and it was nice training wheels for me moving to a new town. And then The Boys is just it's a way for people who think of themselves as better than the Marvel movies to still enjoy a superhero movie because it's self-referential.
Wow.
And I liked it.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. But yeah, The Boys just got recently recommended to me like 2 days ago actually, so it's definitely on my watch list. It
It's
seems a lot
cool.
of
It's
fun.
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's an uncomfortable show.
Yeah, but not just because of the like gore or whatever. It's
No.
like emotionally uncomfortable.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. For me, my the little story of how I came to watch these shows is my roommate has access to HBO Max, and she is currently away, so I have been using her HBO Max account.
Hmm.
I've been watching The Comeback featuring Lisa Kudrow, and it, Jesus Christ, what can I say about it? Is just it's uncomfortable in the same way that it's like total kind of cringe comedy, but it's done
Hmm.
so perfectly. Lisa Kudrow is iconic in the role of Valerie Cherish. The premise of the show is that she is kind of like this C-list actress who was on a sitcom maybe 10, 15 years ago, and she's kind of like fell by the wayside, but she books a minor role on a new sitcom, and then
Hmm.
through that she gets this documentary, The Comeback, and she thinks that like she just thinks that she's like Julia Roberts or something, and she has this idea that she's like this super famous actress, but everyone's like kind of letting her do it, but it's like it's really uncomfortable and it's kind of sad, but it's very, very funny.
Oh man.
And I've seen it described many times as the like the best TV show ever,
Oh my God. Wow.
and it kind of is. It's just like she never misses a beat, and the jokes are so good and dry, and it's just like Lisa Kudrow has always been my favorite of the Friends because I think she's very dynamic in the different things that she's been able to show, and The Comeback is a great exhibition of that. So I've been watching that. And secondly, is a show that I've been wanting to watch for a really long time, but I didn't have access until now. It's called Love and Death. Yeah, it's like a true crime story, I guess, about a woman who and a man who have an affair, and they're all like involved in this very Christian community. And she propositions him to have an affair in like the kind of most pragmatic, unsexy way. She just gets in his car and says, "Do you want to have an affair?" And he's like, "Let me think about it." And then they have an affair. But it's Elizabeth Olsen as the lead actress, and she is just unbelievable as always. Jesse Plemons, who I'm in love with, he plays such a sweetie, even though he's like being an adult there and he's kind of nasty to his wife. He's like very cute. And Lily Rabe as well, who plays the wife of Jesse Plemons. But it's very good, and I feel like maybe I won't give away the story because I don't feel uncomfortable talking about it because it's grisly, I would say, the
Oh.
outcome. But also because it's great, and I think that if you could go into the show not knowing what happens, it would make it all the more exciting. But it's a very exciting show. It's tantalizing. Yeah, really good. Yeah, I'm good with those. I'm sure that in the coming weeks I'll have a lot more movie recommendations once I'm finished at the film festival. But yes. Yeah. So should we get into Wise John?
Let's begin.
Why don't you start just by telling me how you came? I'm sure it's a short story, but how you came to be uh performing as Wise John.
Uh, it's actually not really a short story. It's a pretty long story.
Yeah, I'm here for
Um,
it.
cool. I um this is like one of those stories that's like you can tell it with the benefit of hindsight in a way that seems very neat, but it took many years for me to arrive at this like understanding of of myself, I guess, which
Yeah.
was a very overwhelming situation when I was younger, I suppose. But I've always been kind of caught in between two things, I think, which one of them is like technology and building things, and the other one's music. And you know, maybe this, I think maybe this is especially an American thing, but like there's noise made about like, oh, you should be like a, you know, a well-rounded person, and but that's always like in opposition to, it's like a, you know, you ought to have one thing. You eventually you settle on a career, and then you do your best to do important things there. And so I kind of like by default picked the engineering stuff because I was always good at the math and the physics and things. And music was a hobby that like was my sort of emotional outlet for a long time. So I went to college and I got my undergraduate in computer engineering, and a minor in Chinese, which was an interesting detour. Uh, and so I did all that, and I'd been kind of doing music for fun, and I'd been writing songs just by myself at home for, at that point, you know, 4 or 5 years, and had no intention of doing anything with them. I always thought it sounded pretty miserable to like be famous, and not that I thought that my songs would make me famous, but the fact that I would go through all this effort to put them out, to not want to be the place where everybody hopes that you'll be when you'll put songs out seemed to me kind of ridiculous. So I just kind of sat on them. And then in 2019, like my life just kind of collapsed from like a variety of angles. I I had a lot of kind of big plans, I guess, for my life, banking on the engineering stuff and a relationship that I was in, and I was kind of picking between a couple of different options. And my last semester, I went and studied in Hong Kong in fall 2019, which, if you tracked current affairs at the time, was a bad time to be in Hong Kong.
For sure.
And I'm also chronically ill. I have like chronic migraine headaches and some other stuff. And so this has only happened to me twice in my life, but mostly like they're pretty manageable. And sometimes they get worse, sometimes they get better. I have like really good medications, and I'm on a lot of them, and like some helpful things like some glasses that I wear almost all the time. But sometimes like the set of conditions that I have will like coincide in an unfortunate way, and then I become like profoundly disabled. So it happened once in high school. That was the first time when I sort of got diagnosed with all this stuff in my junior year. And it was like, am I going to die? Like nobody could figure out what was wrong with me.
Wow.
I thought my life was over. And I was just, you know, lying in the dark in my room for 4 months, unable to think or do anything. Just sort of, I describe it as like a coma light, you know, like I was like kind of still there. And like friends said that they talked to me, but I don't really like remember much except for just like being in pain and not knowing where I was. So I sort of recovered from that and was able to like go to college and things, which was not a given that, because the medicines ended up working pretty well and things. So I kind of thought I'd left it behind me. But then when I went to Hong Kong, it turned out like, I think it was a combination of the food. Like I have all these food allergies that trigger it. And then also, I don't know. It's like I kind of live with like a body that's a little bit of a ticking time bomb. In that like I don't really know all of what causes me to get sick. And the only way to know is to basically run experiments on myself. And I have stuff in common with like other people that have similar things. So it's like good starting points. But anyway, the food was an issue in Hong Kong, and then the protests were breaking out, and all of the places that I could get groceries and things were getting shut down. And so I started getting really sick, and I lost, like, right now I'm 6'4", and I've always been pretty thin. Like,
Hmm.
but in Hong Kong, I was 6'4" and 140 pounds. Um, I was
Yeah.
like a walking skeleton. And like I
Yeah.
also shaved my head for entirely separate reasons. I was like, because I was in this relationship that I thought was going to be, the one.
Sure.
And we were long distance, and I was like, when am I going to be able to care less about what I look like? Uh, so I shaved my head, but then I got
Okay.
really sick, and I got like covered in burns from like an unrelated thing.
Okay.
And so I looked like I just walked out of Chernobyl. Like, and
Yeah. Wow.
there was this one like awful thing. The last time I like tried to basically like leave Hong Kong to do anything fun, I visited a friend of mine in like uh it's this island called Jinmen, like Kinmen. It's off of like kind of the like most, or maybe like Middle East China.
Hmm.
And there's like an island called Xiamen that's like part of China, and then Jinmen is owned by Taiwan, but it's like in sight of China.
Yeah.
Um, so it's like they're always like a little bit afraid of like when China invades Taiwan. That's spot number one because it's
Yeah.
right close by. But my friend was doing a Fulbright there, and I went and visited her, and it was just like an absolute shit show. I was like in denial about how bad my health was getting, so I took a
Yeah.
train up there and like wasn't super prepared, and stayed the night in this like massage parlor that her like friend had recommended, uh which had no internet presence that I could find. And I kind of forgot that, like, yeah, anyway, so I paid them like $50 to stay the night and get like a 3-hour massage, which was insane. Like, that was really cool. But then I woke up and my head was just like all messed up. I couldn't see straight, and like I couldn't understand what anybody was saying because I get like language processing problems. And I was like,
Oh.
oh no, this is not good because I don't know how to get, like, I had to
Oh
cross the
wow.
island to get to the ferry, and I'd run out of money. And so at some point I like passed out in the street and was just like asleep under a bench. And like
Holy shit.
these like random people came up and were asking like if I needed to be taken to a hospital. And I don't know how I got to my friend, but I got there, and then that's when she shaved my head. And eventually I went back to Hong Kong and made it back okay, and then was just kind of stuck there. But um I then the day the protests were getting worse and I was getting worse, and I needed to be able to get home by myself, because what was I going to do? Like, pay somebody to get me on a plane? I don't know. Like,
Mm.
so I left the program early, and flew home, and just kind of like was semi-conscious for a couple months. But the day that I was leaving, my girlfriend at the time, we kind of finally broke things off. Um, and the things that I was thinking I was going to do was I was either going to like go live in China if like things didn't end up working with her, um, and like see if I could just get really fluent in Mandarin and just go kind of have an adventure, which
Hmm.
clearly became not an option because of how I reacted to living in Hong Kong, which is like the easiest possible place to live in China.
Okay.
Not at the time, but in
Yeah.
general, for Westerners. But uh, so there's that, or I would go move to the city that she's from, or was living in, Seattle, for
Mm.
her, and that became not an option. And those were kind of and then the other third was maybe go do a PhD, and I decided while I was there like it wasn't for me. Um, so I kind of went home, and my like body was erect, and all of the things that I'd had planned for my life had like fallen through, and I just kind of like I just didn't feel like I had anything, and I couldn't leave home, so I couldn't see any friends or really do anything. My parents were living in a town where I didn't like have any friends anymore.
Hmm.
So I was just kind of there. And the only thing that like got me through that, I guess what it was is there was like this moment when I was in Hong Kong and things were like really starting to get bad. And like I realized that it would make me really sad if I died and like all of my music that I'd written was just like voice memos because I listen to them and I know what they should sound like, you know.
Uh-huh.
But like no one else could listen to them and know what they're supposed to sound like. Like the voice
Yeah.
memos are kind of enough for me, but if I don't know, it just made me sad because it felt like I've done all of this stuff for what, you know. um, so I decided I'd like try and put some of it out. And me and another friend of mine who was like my best friend for a time, he was also studying abroad by coincidence in New Zealand and having quite a time of it. So we were sort of in a similar time zone. So we'd talk on the phone when I was in Hong Kong and plan making this album together because he was a producer.
Mm-hmm.
And so like spring of next year, when I was like feeling decent, and I'd sort of like mostly landed a job that I was going to start like soonish. Um, like we went up to his like stepdad's cabin, or his mom's cabin. I forget whose originally it was, and stayed there for like a month and a half and recorded this whole
Wow.
album that you've never heard. And
Oh.
it got most of the way done. And then we went home, and then our lives just, I guess, kind of like went in separate directions. And that's a totally different story. So long story short, we won't be able to put it out. But it was then and with him that like I realized I wanted a pseudonym, because I didn't
Mm-hmm.
at the time. I still was sort of, I had that like, I don't really want people to know who I am. I just want people to listen to the music.
Yeah.
And that turned out to be like kind of with a little bit less naivety and like having interacted with the music stuff a little bit more. I realized like that was not realistic for me. Like my music is not Daft Punk's music, you know, like it's not
Sure.
it's not party music. It's like what people get from it, they get from it being attached to like a person, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to be a person for people to listen to my music. But at the time, I just wanted to like do something like Gorillas, where I'd have like an animated character that was
Yeah.
something. And so we came up with the name Wise John as like a filler,
Mm-hmm.
because John is like the most generic name possible.
Yeah.
And also like half the guys in my family are named John in some capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And then Wise, just I thought it was kind of funny because like, who's this guy think he is? And that's the extremely long story. That did
Yeah.
not need to be that long. Sorry.
No, no, thank you for talking about that. It's like sorry to hear that you had to go through all of that bad stuff to come to that conclusion, I guess.
Yeah, it's all right. I don't know. It was just like in the darkest point of my life, like a thing that, or one of the darkest, not the darkest, but one of the darkest. It was like the thing that I was holding on to was like, maybe this will mean something to other people.
Hmm.
So then I decided to put things out.
Hmm. Yeah, so at least I know this in your stuff that I know that you've put out. What kind of led you to this first album that you ended up making?
Mm. You mean like A Wonderful World, the one that's out?
Yes, A
Yeah.
Wonderful World. That's what I mean.
In my own personal notes, that's album 2.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
There's the Lost album 1.
Wow, lost tapes.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, I wrote that one mostly actually right before, and also like, yeah, it was mostly when it was 2021, so the pandemic had started. I'd been in sort of like my own personal pandemic for like 6 months already. And like
Yeah.
just as I was starting to get better, the whole world shut down and everyone was like freaking out about it. And I'm like, I've been here for months. You know nothing about solitude. I'm prepared. You're nothing. But I was like staying at home with my parents, and I'd started working this job, but was sort of like reckoning with I had a lot of anger in me, which is not something that I'm like the least angry person in existence, like to a
Hmm.
fault. There's times in my life when it's been a major problem because like someone has done like pushed my boundaries or a friend's boundaries too far, and my instinct is to be like, well, I can see why they're doing this. And then like later
Mm.
on, I realized, oh my God, I really should have gotten pissed off because then they would have stopped.
Mm.
But I just had like a lot of anger. I realize now built up from the stuff that had happened. I guess that was like part of my response. And I was living with my parents, and they live in like at the time they're living in Newport Beach, which is like, um, yeah, I'm lucky. My parents are pretty well off, like, and so they were able to live in this place that is like the most bubble that exists.
Right.
It's like south of LA. It's where people go to exist in the era of the 1970s America when it was the best time in the entire world to be a white man.
Okay.
And yeah, and it's it is depending on your taste a very beautiful place. But I just was walking around and couldn't close my eyes to how the beauty was at the expense of like everywhere else.
Yeah.
And that was what I attributed a lot of my anger to. Really, it was just I was angry at like the world, I think. So I was writing this album, I guess, and I called it A Wonderful World, which is pretty sarcastic.
Hmm.
Um, that's where that came from. So I wrote it in 2021, and then we recorded it in October 2021, and then
Mm.
kind of did overdubs for the next 6 months because Alex, the producer that did it. We did it as a profit split. I didn't pay him at all. We just
Mm.
did it together with friends. So he had to like fit it. He kind of did it as like a hobby project between his other
Mm.
production work. So that's why it took so long to make.
Yeah. It's just, yeah, it being kind of that backstory of it kind of being like a sarcastic title, kind of, at least to me, I'm just thinking the title track
Mm,
is quite a sarcastic song.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I think one of my favorite things in music is like when you make a song, my goal is always to make songs that stand alone sonically, where it's like, because people listen to music in different ways. And
Yeah.
I love people that don't pay attention to lyrics. I think like my they're like my favorite listener in a way because like the people that listen to lyrics, they'll get what I'm saying like right away. And they're not like a challenge, you know. They're going to listen to what you're saying to some degree no matter what you say it. And then
Yeah.
like,
Okay.
you know, you want to like impress them, but for me like the real success is if you can get someone who doesn't really know that they need lyrics or that lyrics can mean something to them in
Hmm.
music. And then so they listen to your song, and you're like, oh, this is fun. And then like it sounds one way, and then like 5 listens in, they finally notice the lyrics. And then they're
Hmm.
like, oh wait, this song means a completely different thing than I thought it did. So
Yeah.
that's what I tried to do with A Wonderful World is make it like sneak up on you where you listen
Hmm.
to it and it sounds nice. And then eventually you notice that the lyrics are like pretty angry.
Yeah, for sure. I like this is always something that for a lot of albums that I like, it's a criticism that I often see from critics
Mm,
is songs kind of hopping genre in
mm,
a way. And for me, I don't necessarily see that as an issue because to be honest, like I think that an album can be cohesive and still have different genre per song because it kind of adds to the cohesiveness of it in a way. But that's the vibe that I get from this album of yours is that it's a lot of different sounds in a way. So is it kind of like intentional to create kind of like a broader soundscape to discuss lots of different topics, or was it not anything like that?
that's an interesting question. I mean, I agree. I've like I think life's too short to only write the same song over and over again that sounds the same.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
uh, I think like I think the easiest or like one truth is that I kind of came into that album like with no particular idea of what like it would sound like, I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
I had one song specifically that turned out exactly the way I heard it in my head, and everything else shifted. Which the one song is Fall of Rome.
Yes.
That one
Love
I
that.
I knew
Yeah.
exactly what I wanted that to sound like, and it's actually kind of movie related. But
Hmm. How so?
I you know that movie Battle of Algiers?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
watched that one time in history class in high school, and I like remember this scene in it where like there's this like line of like people getting kicked out of their homes, and they're like walking past this guy in a tower who's like shouting at them in French through a megaphone,
Hmm.
and like it's in black and white, and there's just this sort of like, I mean, shot wise you can't generally see the people's faces, they're just like a stream, and I wanted to make a song that sounded like what that guy was shouting out of the megaphone.
Yeah. Oh, it's
um,
funny that you mentioned that. That was actually shown at the film club
hmm.
pretty recently. We
Oh,
saw.
really?
Yeah, I didn't see it that long ago, but it was it was a tough watch, but kind of cool that you watched it in history class.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm,
It was a tough watch. I would like to watch it again, but I don't know if I have it in me, you know?
I feel that. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Um, but oh yeah, you're asking about the genre stuff. I
Mm,
have to give most credit to the way that album shaped out genre and sonics wise to Alex who produced it.
okay.
Because I wrote all the songs and we sort of came in with those, with the exception of Leaving LA, which like I sort of adjusted on the fly with some feedback from Alex and Adela. Um, but uh, I mean, I looked at it in retrospect and I was like, oh yeah, totally. This is how these songs are supposed to sound. Like
Mm,
that makes sense. But I didn't come in. I think a lot of it reflected his sensibility, and then like because he's really good, it's ended up being what I've wanted my sound to be as I've gotten more cognizant of sonics. But
yeah.
historically, I don't I haven't really paid that much attention to like genre or the way things are produced like
Hmm.
consciously. I mean, obviously, like everybody that says that, they really do care. You just don't know that you care. Um,
Okay.
like, but the way that I thought of it is that I like listen to the songs, and not the like not the way they're dressed. So
Yeah,
I didn't have well
but
developed opinions on it at the time.
it sounds really nice to have a space to have a producer that you can kind of trust so much to help you get to the sound that you maybe don't know that you want.
He's amazing. I
Yeah.
mean, he's just produced my album number 3.
Mm.
Um, yeah,
Mm.
it's not done
Well,
yet.
yeah, we can get to it briefly if you're okay talking about it, if it's like sneak preview. But
Sure.
so from A Wonderful World, which I just wanted to say that my favorite song is Borderline, if you didn't know.
Cool.
Yeah, I love that. It's like
Yay.
sleeper moist on hit, I think.
Interestingly, that is the one that is the least sounds the least like what I thought that it was going to sound like.
Really?
Yeah, it was like I came in and I thought I wanted it to sound like kind of Sufjan Stevensy.
Yeah.
Um, and Alex, the way that he did this was pretty funny. He was like, "So what do you think this is gonna sound like?" And I said like some stuff, and he was like, "All right, sounds good." And then we recorded like and then like as the recording session went on, I was like, maybe we could like do this and it'll sound a little bit like. And he's like, how about we just do this a little bit? And then like we finished that session, and I hadn't heard any of his thoughts. And he a week and a half later, he like sends me a thing, and it sounds like kind of like what Borderline sounds like now, which is this sort of Radioheady, like I don't know how you'd describe it. It's like a lot of low end and kind of
Yeah.
like dark. Um,
I just think it's like in my head, if I picture like an image of it, if I had to pick an image to the song, it's like driving on a bridge at nighttime.
Cool. Cool. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. I like that.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
my response to his first draft was like, I hate this. How do I tell him that I don't want him to do this anymore?
Oh yeah.
And then
Okay.
I told him that. I was like, I think we need to go in a totally different direction. He was like, all right, sounds good. Well, maybe we'll revisit it in a little bit. And then like 3 weeks later, I hit him up and I was like, yo, you didn't delete any of that, did you? He's like, no, I've been working on it.
Yeah. But it sounds like he knows.
He
That's
knows.
yeah. Um yeah. So we have A Wonderful World, which is album number 2, I guess.
Mm,
Secret album
yes,
number 2. But then we come to the Mr. Love Sunset Show.
that's right.
How did this little EP come about?
Yes. Well, so the last 4 years have really all been, I think, after effects of 2019 for me, like
Mhm.
psychologically. And I'm sort of like, this third album has been me sort of trying to close the book, and get closure. And I'm feeling in a place where I guess I would say like the weight of the past is considerably diminished,
Yeah.
for me. And so I'm sort of like running around trying to figure out what to do with myself now that there's not all this shit on my head. So it's great. It's a good place to be.
Yeah.
But I would say like, so one of the things that happened was in 2022, I was living in Oregon, with some friends during the like pandemic. That was 2022, right? No, it was 2021.
Hmm.
2021. And A Wonderful World was recorded in 2020. I got my years mixed up.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, A Wonderful
Yeah.
World was recorded in 2020 and
Yes.
also was written in 2020. And then
Okay.
we skip ahead a year, and now it's 2021. And I'm living in Bend, Oregon, with some friends, and I've been working this engineering job for about a year and a half at that point, I think. And I was still just like, I guess like whatever was in my head was like coming to like a weird boiling point, and I was just kind of in a dark place. And some other stuff had happened, like I'd lost a couple friends, to various things,
Hmm.
deaths mostly, but also fights and things. And I was just kind of feeling increasingly isolated, and like I'd guess I'd always had an ambition with the engineering stuff. I had an image of myself as like I wanted to make something that changed the world for the better. You can dive into that psychologically. I don't think I really believe in that approach to things anymore.
Hmm.
But like, so I kind of had this idea, especially when I found that first job, which was like working for a startup, and the hours really intense, and um, like that it would be giving me like the meaning that I needed from my life. And then as like the other legs were sort of like kicked out from underneath me, it was like just me and that job and like 3 other friends who were just going through it,
Yeah.
in this town where we knew nobody. And like there was this moment where like I one of my friends had this like mental breakdown, and he had his like stepdad pick him up and drive him up to his stepdad and his mom's place in like southern Washington, which is like 5 hours, 4 hour drive away. And then like he calls me, he's like, yo, I need to be back at work on Monday. Can you like come pick me up later? And I'm like, sure. I'll do anything to like get out of here right now.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh.
so I drove up on Friday, and it was just like Eastern Oregon is so beautiful. It's like probably the most beautiful place I've ever been. You just like look west, and there's these like the Cascades that's like mostly low mountains, and then there's just huge volcanoes sticking out of it. And to
Wow.
the east, it's like green and rolling, but it gets drier as it goes on. And so sometimes you can see just like so far away. And I was driving, and in like I think for the first time in like a long time, I just sort of started feeling kind of okay. And
Hmm.
I stopped at this like graveyard in this town with like 100 people. And I was just sitting there, and I brought my guitar, and I was sitting like looking out, and it hit me all of a sudden like this is the happiest I've been in like two years, and it has nothing to do with any of the things that I'm spending my life doing and that I thought would be like giving me meaning.
Yeah.
And I like it just was like one of those moments where just like things like crystallize all at once. And I was like, I need to quit my job because I'm going downhill quickly and I need to try something new. So I was like, well, it wasn't that I was like, oh, I have always had this dream to be a famous musician, and now I finally get to go chase that. It was more like, well, this isn't working. And the only other obvious thing that I haven't tried was to do music full time.
Yeah.
I had some money saved up. And so I kind of like started putting the plans in motion, and I moved to New York and I got out of Bend, and that sort of phase came to an end, I guess, which was good.
Yeah.
But I got to New York, and in January I left my job, and then I was sort of like, all right, let's figure out how to be an artist. And I met some people. One of them was Quinn Devlin. I met him at a bar. He introduced himself as a professional drinker, but it turns out that he was also a music producer.
Cool.
But I think professional drinker still applies.
Okay.
But he was cool, and I liked his music, and so I was like, would you like to make something together? And he said, sure. And then so we recorded Mr. Love and Marry Another Man a month or two later.
Okay.
When I was in New York and still sort of getting my feet as like a independent musician that was taking, because I'd like put out A Wonderful World before, but it was literally just I've made this thing, I'm going to put it on Spotify.
Okay.
I didn't like think about it at all or do any promotion, or I like barely had an Instagram account. So Mr. Love Sunshine Show was the first time that I like, I came into it and I had all of the like energy that I used to be putting into being a computer engineer full time except now I was getting put into like trying to figure out the music business, which is not a task that I think I am super well suited for. But I tried and am, I suppose, trying. So I like promoted that, and then it did pretty well. And that's how like most people have found my music, which is funny because I think from the music side, I mean, the New York arc has been like a whole arc, and I found a band there. I got together some folks and recorded some stuff with Quinn and with Sahil, who mixed the stuff that I did with Quinn, and recorded some stuff with him. There's still things to come out there. It's been like a whole arc, but like musically, probably a little bit less formative than A Wonderful World, which most people haven't heard. They like my music these days.
Cool. But I think that it's a wonderful EP. I think it has like a real nice cohesiveness to it. I just thought we should just if I could briefly talk about how we met.
Yeah, totally.
Super chance encounter, I think.
Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah. And just kind of get up to speed how we got to right now. Yeah, you were visiting Bergen.
That's right.
And I'm sure maybe you can talk a bit more about what you were up to, but I was just living my life doing my own normal shit. Got very drunk, went to my friend's house. Well, not in that order. I went to my friend's house and got drunk.
That would be a weird order.
I got wasted and I showed up at my friend's house and I said, let's go to an open mic. Because we'd been a couple times before, because one of his friends plays guitar very well, so he likes to go and play. And we got there quite late, and then I just caught maybe the last minute of this guy playing some kind of very different song, I would say. I think it was the yoga one.
Oh, Mr. Alvarado.
Yes.
I need to put that out.
Yeah, and I was like, this is really fun. And what is this guy's deal? Because it felt like kind of almost like open to me, and that it was like serious but not serious. And I thought the lyrics were a lot of fun. And then later we were at the City Rail stop, and I was like, "Hey, it's like I played that song that I liked. I'm gonna go talk to him." And my friend was like, "Please don't go talk to him. You're really drunk. Don't talk to him." But I did.
I actually did not know that you were really drunk. I
I was very drunk.
I did not
Yeah.
give that impression. That's so funny.
Yeah.
I think I was completely sober. I don't think that I'd had a single drink because I couldn't have any of the drinks at the bar. They all had like stuff in them that I can't have.
Okay.
That's so funny. So you were hammered.
Yeah, basically.
Oh.
But then I think somehow we ended up exchanging social media, and then and then I came and hung out with you later in the week, and then. But I think that I listened to your music in the meantime. Of that week, I was like, I'm gonna check this guy out, and I listened to A Wonderful World, and I was like, this is sick.
Dope.
It's dope. Yeah, it was like really it fits the vibe of stuff that I like. It's like kind of esoteric commentary music that has very good production.
You introduced me to Wise Blood because you said that it reminded you of her album, and I listened to it. I was like, oh my God, this album is so cool. So I was both very honored, and I now like use her as like a mental reference for stuff. So
cool. But yeah, it was kind of like Wise Blood and also Father John Misty. It's like two artists that I really revere and think you have a similar writing style too, in a way.
Thanks.
So it's kind of like
the Father John Misty side. That is like, I would say I would have been consciously aware of that because I really liked him in college. Not that I don't like him anymore, but it's just that was my heyday.
Yeah, I've recently been re-listening to Pure Comedy, the album, and it's just it's as good as I remember.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah. But then later that semester I was kind of more involved in the film club, and they someone offhand just said that they'd wanted to start a podcast, but they had no one to do it. And then I was like, I will do it. If you don't mind me inserting myself into this conversation, but I will do this podcast. And then immediately I was like, I know who to ask for the logo, and I'm going to ask Conor to do the music.
Cool.
Yeah. And I'm very glad that you said yes, because it's very nice.
The end.
The end. Yeah.
A beautiful story.
Yeah. I feel really pleased with the way that it worked out. And it's lovely listening to it every time that I'm editing.
Yay.
Yeah.
Thanks. I'm happy with how it turned out too. I definitely it's one of those things where I learned a lot from it. So if I were to do it again, I'd do it slightly different. But then that's everything. I think with music, you're like, probably with any art, just music is what I know. Like your goal is not to capture perfection because that doesn't exist. Your goal is to capture the truth in a moment. And like the truth of any song in that moment is like you are who you are, and you use the facilities that you have to express something that you're feeling, because like in a minute or a day or a week, that thing that you're feeling is gone. And while you're chasing perfection, the reason why you're making the thing has slipped out from your hands. So the theme song, it's an imperfect work, but it catches the vibe of what I was doing at the time. And so in that respect, I'm happy with it.
I'm glad. I thought, just to round up, I'm going to put you on the spot really terribly.
Okay.
And ask you to maybe pick 4 in classic Letterboxd style. I'll ask you to pick 4 of your favorite films. But maybe also musically influential in a way, or like what films could kind of drive that inspiration.
Okay.
And
All
they can
right.
be as outrageous or highbrow as you want. There is absolutely no judgment.
Okay. So I will say first that largely because of what my relationship to music is, which is like pretty, it's like a creator's view of it, um, which like comes with immense privileges, I guess, but you also
Hmm.
lose something when you gain something. And when you like spend a lot of time making things and figuring out how to make them, then you lose a little bit of the like beginner's ear, of like you
Yeah,
just listen to something and it sounds like magic, and you have no idea what it's done. And that feeling kind of comes rarer and rarer as you get better at making something.
yeah.
Um, so I very deliberately, I know nothing about movies. I'm happy to know nothing about movies. I can talk
No.
about them. Like
Hmm.
I've done my liberal arts classes where I write about movies, but
Hmm.
like I don't know. Like I try not to be anything more than like interested. Like I try not to let myself dive too far into it because I like the experience of like I go to the movie theater, I watch something on TV and I'm like, wow, you know.
Yeah,
So
totally.
this is not going to be a very well informed list, but
But that's totally
um,
okay. Like I famously say that I have not really seen a movie that I haven't enjoyed.
cool.
Like I I don't think that there's any need to be exclusionary just because it doesn't fit some kind of set of regulations that has been dictated by some fancy directors. Like you watched it, you enjoyed it. That's the end.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, off the top of my head, my girlfriend was just showing me uh she likes Tarantino and I hadn't
Hmm.
watched much of him. We watched Kill Bill and Kill Bill Volume
Ooh,
2, and I really
great.
thought those were spectacular.
They
His
are
like
great.
attention to detail is incredible. It's like everything
Yeah,
in the scene is like it's like in alignment, and it's hard to explain exactly like what I mean by that, but I'm sure everybody that watches it knows, like
it's incredible.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also like it feels like a story that somebody needed to tell because they've been through it, but it's about a bunch of fake people that don't exist. I don't know how you do that, like
Yeah. It's convincing.
so convincing.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna put that on there. I don't know.
Hmm. Kill Bill 1 and 2.
And then just as a nod to my younger self, when I was a kid, I read a lot of books and I was kind of insufferable about movies because I was like, I don't want to watch the movie. I'm gonna read the book. Like,
Hmm.
so like I never saw Harry Potter or like
Oh,
any of the big like stuff that came out when I was a kid. And because I was too busy being a stuck-up dweeb. but people would ask me what my favorite movie was, and I had to have some kind of answer. So I just like had an answer, which was a movie that I saw at a friend's like sleepover birthday party, and I thought it was just cool of his dad to let us watch it because it was like slightly inappropriate, which was
okay.
which was Spaceballs, which in retrospect is so funny because it's like not inappropriate at all.
Okay, cool.
But it's like I've watched it again as an adult and I'm like, this movie is not that good, like at all. And also I'd
Hmm.
never seen Star Wars or Star Trek, so I had none of the context necessary to
Yeah,
understand that
okay.
movie.
That's very
But
fun.
yeah, that's on there. And then
Mm.
two last ones. Just I really liked The Notebook.
Okay.
I my mom's parents both died of Alzheimer's,
Mm.
and the like ending of that movie really struck me as really beautiful. Like still trying.
Yeah.
Um, oh wait, actually, I do have one. This
Okay,
this
go for it.
it's a really shallow and dumb reason to put it on there, but uh, I forget if it was. I think it was Baby Driver.
Yeah.
Um, I really liked the way music was integrated in that movie.
Mm.
Like the because the premise, if I remember correctly, was like the main character, Baby Driver, is like uh he has tinnitus So like
Mhm.
he has to be listening to music all the time. And like everything in that movie was synced up to like really good music. I kind of feel similarly about Guardians of the Galaxy. Like that, the
Yeah,
soundtrack of that first movie is so good.
yeah,
Like I liked that. I just found both of those like they're not deep movies. And you can say whatever you want about them, but the music,
mm,
the soundtrack, like I love the
yeah,
like jukebox musical kind of thing.
yeah, for sure. Those two have great soundtracks.
Okay.
Good film choices. I was just gonna say, I don't know how you feel about horror, and
Mm.
I can feel my board member eye rolls coming that I'm going to talk about this, but I think it kind of ties nicely into a little bit what you were talking about. There is a film called Pearl, which came out.
Earl. Oh, yes. It's that's the one with the gal who like is insane and killed.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna. Yeah. Oh, I watched that. It was so good.
holy shit,
It was
great.
horrifying.
Yeah, but I love like when I watched it, I was like, I am finding myself identifying with this character more so than I've ever identified with any character before because
Wow.
it's this total small town art struggle
Huh.
that she dreams
Right.
of a bigger life,
Are you from a
and then
small
it's
town?
yeah, like I'm from a little village on the coast,
Cool.
and I guess like in the same ways, like I do film stuff, but I also don't talk about that. I have a science career, and that's
Right.
happening at the same time. But I'd never talk about it, but like just the kind of reality of like what does that look like to someone who doesn't get to
Mm.
achieve their dreams.
Right.
Yeah, which is the kind of what that story is for that film. So I felt that like anxiety that she feels
Right.
in that
But
film
then
of
also
like
that it's happening to someone who like you I think that is totally one of the most amazing things about that movie is that you
yeah,
identify with the character, but then they kind of do this like rug pull where it's like, "Oh my God, she's like
killing
she's
people.
she's yeah."
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, I was just like the struggle of her. I feel like
Mm.
can a lot maybe a lot of creative people can identify. Maybe not with the murder, but with the like dreams of escaping.
Yeah.
Uh, not
Yeah.
just a small town, but like escaping your life and your expectation in a way. But I guess it's also kind of similar to your story, except you didn't kill anyone.
I didn't that 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 you know of.
Very true. Yeah, but thanks so much for being on. This has been really great. Thanks for talking all about your music journey. It's been really interesting to listen to.
Cool. I'm sad it's over. That was fun. It's
Yeah.
uh it's always interesting to have to synthesize your life in all of its
Mm,
messiness into a convincing narrative.
yeah. You did it very convincingly.
Thank you. I strive always to be convincing.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, well, that's great. Uh, again, thank you very much. And also, thank you to the listener for listening. Please go check out Wise John's extensive, brilliant catalog and new music coming soon, I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks for caring about my music, Joe. I really appreciate it.
Oh, that's no problem. Okay. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.
This has been a Bergen Film Club production. Our music is by Wise John. Check them out on Instagram at WISEJohnOfficial. Our logo is by Pia Sofia Brentersen. This episode was produced, mixed and engineered by Joel Lawrence. Our researchers are Inke Shilbrai-Bern and Mamina Nazmajid. Want to talk to us about films? Then please send us an email at podcast@bergenfilmclub.com. Follow the show on Instagram and Twitter at TheRealThingPod. Check us out on Letterboxd at BFK The Real Thing. Thank you and goodbye. Listen, follow, leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, or wherever it is that you get your podcasts.